The Earth gave up a face that was not human. In 1986, in a quiet Chinese field, archaeologists brushed away the soil to reveal a stair of bronze and gold. This was not just an artifact, it was a messenger from a world entirely forgotten. Today, you will uncover the full story of the Sanxingdui culture, a civilization so advanced and so strange it forces us to rewrite the ancient past. Who were these people who crafted towering statues and hypnotic masks, only to shatter and bury them all? What cataclysm made a sophisticated society simply disappear? The answers lie in broken bronze and silent gold, waiting in the dark for almost 3,000 years. What do you believe is the most compelling reason an entire culture might vanish? That messenger from the forgotten world had been waiting for a farmer's plow. In the spring of 1929, a man named Yan Cheng was digging an irrigation ditch in his field in Sichuan province when his shovel struck something hard and smooth. He pulled out not a rock but a piece of ancient jade, then another and another. He had uncovered a hidden cache of stone and jade artifacts, treasures that had lain undisturbed for millennia. He did not know it, but his simple act of digging for water had just cracked open the door to a lost kingdom. For decades, this first discovery remained a curious local mystery, a whisper of something ancient beneath the rice fields. The world took no real notice. Then, more than 50 years later, the Earth decided to tell the rest of its story. In 1986, workers at a local brick factory were digging for clay when their tools hit bronze. This time, archaeologists were called in, and what they began to uncover was beyond any expectation. They designated the site Pit Number 1, and then, just a month later, they found Pit Number 2 mere meters away. What they found inside was not a tidy collection of artifacts. It was a scene of deliberate ritual destruction. Imagine the first archaeologist peering into that dark, rectangular pit. The beam of their flashlight would have swept over a chaotic, glittering mass. There were hundreds of elephant tusks layered like giant pick-up sticks. Beneath them, a tangled forest of broken bronze trees, shattered faces, and bent ritual vessels. Everything was charred, blackened by fire. Gold foil, once pressed onto masks, lay crumpled. Jade blades were snapped in two. This was not a tomb for a king. It was not a hidden treasury. This was a funeral for a culture. Every single object, from the most enormous bronze statue to the smallest jade bead, had been ritually smashed, burned, and then carefully buried in these two pits. The archaeologists were not just excavating artifacts, they were witnessing the final, dramatic act of a civilization, a performance staged for the gods 3,000 years ago. The sheer scale was overwhelming, but the true shock was the style. Nothing looked Chinese. The faces that emerged from the soil had eyes that protruded like cylinders, ears that stretched out like wings, and expressions of otherworldly calm or fierce intensity. They were looking at the art of a people who had followed a completely different artistic and spiritual rulebook, a civilization that had thrived in the heart of what is now China, yet was utterly alien to everything historians thought they knew. Those faces from the pit had no names. We call this civilization Sanxingdui, but that is just the name of the local village where the artifacts were found. The people themselves left us no letters, no chronicles, no royal decrees carved into bone or bronze. They are a ghost in history, defined entirely by the breathtaking objects they left behind and the shocking way they chose to discard them. This anonymity is the very heart of the mystery. Who were they? We know they thrived for centuries, from roughly 1600 to 1046 before the Common Era. This means they were building their bronze giants and offering sacrifices to their gods at the very same time the famous Shang Dynasty was ruling the central plains of China, over 300 miles to the east. But the comparison only makes Sanxingdui more strange. The Shang left behind thousands of oracle bones covered in early Chinese writing. they celebrated their kings and ancestors in intricate ritual vessels. Sanxingdui left behind no writing at all, and their art glorifies not human rulers but something profoundly different. So who were they? One leading theory points to ancient texts written centuries later, which speak of a legendary Shu kingdom in the Sichuan basin. Could Sanxingdui be that lost Shu civilization? It is a compelling idea, a chance to finally give these people a historical identity. Yet the texts are vague, written long after this culture had vanished, more myth than history. Another theory suggests they were a distant, isolated branch of the same early Chinese civilization that produced the Shang, but one that developed in spectacular isolation, cut off by the treacherous mountains surrounding the Sichuan basin, evolving its own stunning and bizarre artistic language. Then there is the most radical possibility. Looking at those elongated faces, the prominent noses, and the stylized trees, some scholars see echoes of ancient cultures far to the west in Central Asia or even beyond. Could there have been a cultural connection across vast distances that we have simply never imagined? The truth is, we do not know. They remain a civilization without a voice, their story told only in silent bronze and buried gold. This is what makes every artifact so charged with meaning. Each broken mask is not just a piece of art. It is a single syllable from a language we cannot speak, a desperate clue to an identity erased by time. Their silent language is spoken most fluently in bronze. To understand just how radical Sanxingdui art truly was, you need to place it beside its famous contemporary. The Shang Dynasty to the east perfected the ritual vessel. Their bronzes are magnificent cauldrons and goblets, surfaces alive with swirling patterns called the tauti or animal masks. These objects were for ceremony and ancestor worship, their beauty serving a formal, ritual purpose. Sanxingdui used the same advanced piece mold casting technology, but their vision exploded in a completely different direction. They were not interested in vessels, they were obsessed with the human form, scaled to a size meant to inspire awe and perhaps fear. The most breathtaking example is a statue known simply as the standing figure. Reconstructed, it towers at 8.5 feet tall. This is not a lifelike portrait, but a powerful abstraction of authority. The figure stands on a base shaped like a mythical beast, its body slender and rigid, its arms impossibly long and held in a circle as if once gripping some colossal object now lost to time. Its face bears that signature Sanxingdui calm, with huge, protruding eyes that seem to see beyond the physical world. The clothing is elaborately decorated with dragons and patterns, suggesting this was no ordinary person, but perhaps a priest king, a shaman who served as the living bridge between his people and their gods. The scale alone is a statement of unimaginable ambition. Casting something this large and complex in bronze over 3,000 years ago was a staggering technical feat. The artisans had to create separate clay molds for different sections of the body, pour molten bronze into the narrow space between them, and hope the entire structure cooled without cracking or collapsing. That they succeeded tells us this society commanded not just spiritual vision, but immense material resources and industrial skill. Yet for all its technical mastery, the figure feels strangely hollow. It is not solid bronze, but thin, shell-like casting. This was not a monument built for durability in a public square. It was likely meant for a specific, dramatic ritual, to be seen in flickering torchlight before meeting its destined end in the sacrificial pits. And it is just one character in a vast bronze cast. Alongside it were masks with eyes stretched out like telescopes, some with gilding of pure gold still clinging to their surfaces. There were animal-headed sculptures and, most mysteriously, a tree. Not a small ornament, but a bronze sacred tree over 13 feet tall, with birds perched on its branches and dragons winding down its trunk. This was a cosmology cast in metal, a physical model of their spiritual universe. Where Shang art wove symbolism into intricate surface patterns, Sanxingdui built their symbolism in 3 dimensions at a monumental scale. They did not just depict power, they manufactured it, creating gigantic, silent witnesses to a belief system so potent it demanded its own destruction. What kind of ceremony required props of such immense and terrifying beauty? But the most haunting characters in this bronze cast are the masks. If the standing figure represents ritual authority, the masks are the raw essence of Sanxingdui spirituality. They are not portraits of living people, they are visions of beings from another plane of existence. Their features are wildly exaggerated, a language of distortion meant to convey power beyond the human. The pupils of their eyes bulge forward like thick cylinders, as if straining to see into realms invisible to ordinary sight. Their ears are enormous, stretching outward like the wings of a bat, seemingly designed to catch whispers from the spirit world. The jaws are strong and angular, the expressions frozen in an unsettling blend of serene detachment and fierce intensity. Among these, one mask stands as the ultimate icon. It is known as the colossal bronze mask, and it is a face built for a giant. It measures over 4 feet wide, far too large for any human to ever wear. Its most staggering feature is its eyes. They are not merely protruding, they are long, tubular barrels that extend nearly a foot out from the face. Traces of gold foil still cling to its surface, hinting that in its prime, this mask would have blazed with a hypnotic, metallic sheen in the ritual firelight. To stand before it is to feel the weight of a divine gaze. What was the purpose of such an object? Scholars have debated this for decades. One compelling theory is that these masks are physical representations of the gods themselves. The extended eyes could symbolize all-seeing vision, the massive ears all-hearing perception. They were not meant to be worn, but to be displayed, perhaps mounted on pillars or carried in processions as literal faces of the deities being worshipped. Another idea is that they represent deified ancestors, heroes of the past transformed into supernatural guardians. The most intimate theory suggests they were ritual aids for shamans. In many ancient cultures, putting on a mask was an act of transformation, allowing the wearer to shed their human identity and become a vessel for a spirit. Perhaps a priest would don a smaller mask, his own vision limited to narrow slits, while the colossal mask of the god loomed above him, creating a terrifying hierarchy of the human and the divine in one sacred space. Whether they depicted gods, ancestors, or served as shamanic tools, their function was ultimately the same. They were portals. In the smoky darkness of a ritual, with drums pounding and the air thick with anticipation, these bronze faces became alive. The flickering light would dance in those cylindrical eyes, making them seem to move, to focus. The gilded surfaces would reflect the fire like a second sun. For the people of Sanxingdui, these were not cold metal artifacts. They were the means to touch the untouchable, to give form to the formless, to make the terrifying and magnificent powers of their universe momentarily visible. And then, in an act we still struggle to comprehend, they willingly broke these portals and buried them forever. What terrifying knowledge or what profound despair could lead a people to shatter their own gods? The greatest of these shattered portals was not a face but a tree. Among the thousands of fragments pulled from pit number 2, archaeologists faced their most daunting puzzle. They had pieces of thin bronze, curved like branches, leaves, and strange, stylized birds. It took them over 10 years of painstaking work to assemble these broken parts into a single, awe-inspiring vision. The result is the bronze sacred tree, a masterpiece that stands over 13 feet tall. It is not a realistic depiction of nature, but a carefully engineered model of the cosmos. Its trunk rises straight and strong, dividing into 3 layers of branches. Each layer holds 3 curving boughs, making 9 in total, a number often associated with the heavens in ancient Chinese thought. At the tip of each branch sits a magnificent bird, looking down, its beak sharp and its gaze piercing. Hanging from the branches are what appear to be fruits or perhaps ritual bells waiting to chime in a celestial wind. And coiled around the base of the trunk, its head resting at the foot of the tree, is a powerful, sinuous dragon, its body forming a spiraling path from the roots upward. This was far more than a decorative sculpture. Scholars believe this tree served as an axis mundi, a sacred axis of the world. In countless ancient belief systems, from the Norse Yggdrasil to many Siberian shamanic traditions, a great tree or mountain stands at the center of everything. Its roots dig deep into the underworld, its trunk passes through the realm of the living, and its highest branches touch the domain of the gods. It is a ladder for spirits, a conduit for prayers, the central pillar that holds all of creation together. The Sanxingdui tree fits this archetype perfectly. The dragon at its base may represent the chthonic powers of the earth or water. The trunk is the world of humanity. The birds at the peaks are solar symbols, messengers that can fly to the highest heavens. This bronze tree was likely the physical and spiritual centerpiece of their most important rituals, a tool to mediate between all layers of existence. Intriguingly, echoes of this tree appear in later Chinese mythology. Ancient texts speak of the Fusang tree, a gigantic mulberry that grows in the east where the sun rises. 10 suns would perch in its branches and a dragon dwelt at its roots. The parallels are too striking to ignore. It suggests that fragments of Sanxingdui's beliefs may have survived its physical disappearance, seeping into the legends of the cultures that came after. This single artifact tells us that the people of Sanxingdui were not just skilled metalworkers, they were profound cosmologists. They built their understanding of the universe into bronze, creating a permanent, tangible model of their spiritual geography. Yet this permanent model was not meant to last. It too was violently broken, burned, and laid to rest in the dark earth. Why would a people so carefully craft the very ladder to their gods, only to smash it and bury it forever? The answer may lie not in the objects themselves, but in the final, cataclysmic event that demanded such a sacrifice. But if the bronzes were for the gods, the gold was for the one who spoke to them. Among the ashes and broken metal, a different kind of treasure gleamed. Gold, in the world of Sanxingdui, was not used for coins or jewelry as we know it. It was hammered into thin, delicate foil and applied to objects of wood and bronze, a skin of divine light. 2 of these gold objects stand out, not for their size, but for their profound symbolic weight. The first is a wooden scepter, long since rotted away, but its gold sheath survived. Unrolled and studied, it reveals an intricate narrative in hammered gold. The design shows a sequence of powerful symbols. There are fish swimming in lines, above them birds with their heads turned, and at the very top the faces of 4 human figures wearing crowns, each with a serene, commanding expression. This is widely believed to be a royal scepter, a literal symbol of authority held by the ruler of Sanxingdui. But its imagery tells a deeper story. The fish likely represent the watery underworld. The birds symbolize the heavens. The crowned human faces sit at the apex, mediating between these 2 realms. This suggests the ruler was not just a political leader, but a supreme shaman, the living axis mundi who could navigate the spirit world, communicate with ancestors, and ensure the harmony of the cosmos for his people. To hold this scepter was to hold the structure of reality itself. The second object is even more iconic. It is a circular sun disk, often called a sun wheel, about the size of a large dinner plate. Its design is breathtaking in its simplicity and power. A central round hub is surrounded by a ring, and connecting them are 5 spokes evenly spaced. Radiating outward from the rim are arcs of light, like sunbeams frozen in bronze, now covered in a sheen of gold foil. When it was new, this object would have been a blinding circle of reflected fire, a portable sun. There is little doubt this represents a solar deity, the most universal of all ancient gods. The disk is not heavy or thick. It is light, designed perhaps to be carried on a pole in processions or mounted high on a wall to catch the first and last light of the day. It is a direct, powerful statement of worship for the celestial force that gives life. Together, the scepter and the sun disk paint a picture of a society ruled by a priest-king under the watchful eye of a sun god, a theocracy where spiritual power and political power were one and the same. Yet this gold also whispers of distant connections. The people of the Shang Dynasty to the east rarely used gold, preferring the solemn beauty of jade and bronze. But far to the west, across the vast Eurasian steppes, cultures from Siberia to the Black Sea prized gold above all else, hammering it into thin foil for ceremonial regalia. The very technique of gold foil sheathing and the solar symbolism of the disc find echoes in those distant lands. This does not mean Sanxingdui was founded by travelers from the west, but it hints at tenuous, long-distance threads of cultural exchange, ideas and technologies flowing along trade routes through mountain passes we thought were impenetrable. It suggests Sanxingdui was not a hermetically sealed bubble, but a brilliant, unique culture that may have absorbed influences from a wider world, then transformed them into something entirely its own. Their gold, then, is a paradox. It symbolizes the ultimate local authority of a divine king, while simultaneously hinting that this forgotten kingdom might have been connected to horizons far broader than we ever imagined. But the true measure of a civilization's reach is not always found in gold or bronze. It can be found in the mundane, the organic, and the quietly traded. When archaeologists first peered into the sacrificial pits, they were confronted by a startling layer. Not metal, but a dense, tangled mat of ivory. Hundreds of elephant tusks, some over 5 feet long, were stacked in careful piles or simply thrown in as a foundation for the broken bronzes above. This was not a handful of treasured items. This was an industrial-scale offering. The sheer volume of ivory is staggering, and it forces a difficult question. Where did it all come from? Elephants are not native to the Sichuan basin today, and the climate 3,000 years ago, while warmer, still makes a large local population unlikely. The most plausible answer is trade, and trade on a breathtaking scale. Each tusk represents a journey. They likely came from the lush, tropical forests of what is now Yunnan province to the south, or even further from the lands of Southeast Asia. This means the people of Sanxingdui were not isolated artists. They were connected to a vast and sophisticated network of exchange that stretched for hundreds, perhaps thousands, of miles over treacherous mountain passes and along winding river valleys. Ivory was a luxury good, a symbol of status and spiritual potency across the ancient world. To acquire it in such quantity, Sanxingdui must have had something valuable to offer in return. Perhaps it was their own exquisite bronze work, or the salt from local wells, or other resources now lost to us. These silent tusks are the physical proof of a bustling economy, of diplomats and merchants bringing the wealth of distant jungles to be sacrificed in a Sichuan field. Alongside the ivory lay another kind of treasure, one that whispers of a different kind of connection. Scattered among the broken bronzes were objects made of jade, specifically ritual blades known as zhang, and mysterious tubular forms called kong. For an expert's eye, these objects were an instant shock. The kong is a hallowed ritual object, a cylinder encased in a square, often carved with intricate faces and patterns. It is most famously associated with the Liangzhu culture, a jade working society that flourished over 1,000 miles to the east, near the coast, and which vanished over 1,000 years before Sanxingdui even began. The zhang blade, a flat, ceremonial knife with a distinctive notched handle, is a classic artifact of the Shang Dynasty, Sanxingdui's contemporary to the east. So what were they doing here? The jade itself could have been traded, as the stone is not local to Sichuan. But the forms, the very blueprints of these objects, are cultural signatures. Their presence at Sanxingdui is not like finding a random precious stone. It is like finding a perfectly copied medieval stained glass window in an ancient Aztec temple. The designs are too specific to be coincidence. This suggests something far more profound than simple commerce. It points to cultural borrowing, to the slow, deliberate transmission of ideas across immense spans of both distance and time. Perhaps traveling shamans or artisans carried the sacred forms of the Kong from the memory of Liangzhu, or the style of the Zhang from the court of the Shang, and the Sanxingdui elite adopted them, integrating these powerful foreign symbols into their own unique spiritual practices. These jade objects transform our view of Sanxingdui. They are no longer a bizarre, isolated wonder. They become a nexus, a cultural crossroads. They sat at the center of a web, pulling in ivory from the southern jungles, artistic ideas from the eastern coasts and plains, and perhaps even technological knowledge from the western steppes, weaving it all into a civilization that was utterly unique, yet deeply connected to a wider Bronze Age world. The mystery then deepens. If they were so connected, so vibrant and engaged, why does their story end so abruptly, with everything they cherished broken and buried? This cultural crossroads met its end in two rectangular holes in the ground. The sacrificial pits, numbered 1 and 2 by archaeologists, are not tombs or trash heaps. They are meticulously staged altars of oblivion. To understand the final days of Sanxingdui, you must visualize the sequence of their last great ritual. The pits were dug with precise, straight edges, each about the size of a large living room. The ceremony began with fire. A layer of burnt animal bones and thick ash carpets the very bottom, the residue of initial sacrifices that filled the air with smoke and the scent of burning flesh. Upon this scorched foundation, the priests placed their first astonishing offering. Dozens, then hundreds of massive elephant tusks were laid down, creating a dense, white latticework over the ashes. This was a display of staggering wealth, a king's ransom in ivory thrown into the earth. Then the broken world of bronze was lowered in. The sacred tree, the standing figure, the colossal masks, the sun discs, all of it had been deliberately smashed, bent, and scorched by fire. These fragments were not dumped, they were arranged. Larger pieces were placed along the sides of the pit, smaller ones filled the center, as if following a script only they could read. On top of this first layer of metal, more ivory was added, then another layer of shattered bronzes, then more ash and burnt offerings. The stacking is deliberate, a kind of spiritual lasagna, with each stratum representing a different phase of the termination rite. Every object, from the most powerful god mask to the smallest jade blade, was rendered useless, killed before being given to the earth. This was not an act of anger or panic. It was an act of profound, terrifying purpose. So what was this purpose? Why would a people destroy the very objects that connected them to the divine? Scholars have wrestled with this for decades, and several haunting theories have emerged. The first idea is a decommissioning ceremony. In many ancient cultures, sacred objects were believed to hold power, a life force of their own. When an object became old, or a new dynasty rose, or the ritual calendar turned over, the old sacred items could not simply be stored away or discarded. Their power had to be ritually discharged, released, so it would not linger and cause harm. The breaking, burning, and burying was a way to respectfully retire these divine vessels, to send their spirit back to the gods from whom it came. It was an act of renewal, not of despair. A second, darker theory points to catastrophe. Was this a response to a sudden, overwhelming disaster, a violent invasion by a foreign enemy, perhaps one that shattered their social order and threatened to desecrate their gods? By destroying the sacred objects themselves, the priests would have been performing a desperate act of protection, ensuring the enemy could not capture the power of their deities. Or the catastrophe could have been internal, a dramatic dynastic collapse, a civil war that toppled the priest-king and his entire theological system. The new rulers would need to erase the old gods to make way for the new, burying the past literally and spiritually. A third possibility is that this was the ultimate funerary rite, not for a king, but for the kingship itself. Perhaps the great standing figure was not just a statue, but a vessel for the spirit of the ruler. Upon his death, his ritual regalia, his connection to the gods, had to follow him into the afterlife. The breaking of the objects could symbolize the release of his spirit, while the careful burial provided him with a divine court in the next world. The sheer scale, however, suggests something even grander than a single king's funeral. This feels like the funeral of an era. The intentionality is the key that locks the mystery. They did not hide these treasures to retrieve them later. They did not melt them down to reuse the metal. They performed a public, communal, and incredibly expensive act of irreversible destruction. They chose to sever their own connection to the divine machinery that had sustained them for centuries. Whatever the reason, the message in the soil is clear. The world of Sanxingdui as they knew it was over, and they themselves were the ones who ended it. Their final ritual was a deafening performance, but the aftermath is a profound and unsettling quiet. This silence extends far beyond the sacrificial pits, permeating every aspect of how we try to understand them. Two glaring absences haunt the ruins of Sanxingdui, creating a void where we most need answers. The first is the absence of the dead. Despite decades of meticulous excavation around the main ritual complex, archaeologists have found no royal tombs, no grand burial chambers filled with grave goods, not even any large, organized cemeteries for the common people. This is bizarre for a civilization of such sophistication. The Shang Dynasty, their contemporaries, left behind elaborate tombs like the famous Fu Hao's, packed with treasures for the afterlife. So where did the people of Sanxingdui go when they died? Were they buried in a separate, yet-to-be-discovered necropolis far from the ritual center? Did they practice a form of sky burial or water burial that left no trace in the archaeological record? Or does their lack of tombs reflect a fundamentally different belief about death, one where the spirit required no physical vessel or treasure for its journey, making the ritual pits the only graves they needed for their gods? This missing city of the dead deepens their ghostly presence, making their vibrant life feel even more fleeting. The second absence is even more critical. It is the absence of a voice. Sanxingdui has yielded no writing, not a single inscribed character on bronze, not a scratch on bone, not a mark on pottery. This stands in stark, almost shocking contrast to the Shang, who left behind hundreds of thousands of oracle bone inscriptions, a detailed archive of divinations, wars, and rituals that gives their civilization a direct, decipherable voice. The silence from Sichuan is absolute. This forces a difficult question. Did they ever develop a writing system? Perhaps they used perishable materials like strips of bamboo or silk, which rotted away in the humid Sichuan climate over 3 millennia. This is possible as later Chinese states used bamboo for records. Yet, if they had a complex administrative system requiring writing, we might expect to find impressions on clay or accidental markings elsewhere. We find none. The more haunting possibility is that they chose not to write. What if their power was communicated not through words, but solely through imagery, spectacle, and overwhelming scale? Their entire civilization becomes a monumental statement. The towering bronze figure was their king list. The colossal mask was their holy scripture. The sacred tree was their book of cosmology. In a world without text, authority and belief are performed, not read. A priest-king wielding a gold scepter before a gilded sun disk delivers a more immediate, visceral message than any carved proclamation. This was a culture that spoke directly to the senses and the spirit, bypassing the need for a written lexicon. But for us, this artistic eloquence is a locked room. We can admire the breathtaking beauty of the mask, but without the key of language, we cannot hear the prayers that were spoken to it. We can map the symbolism of the tree, but we cannot read the myth that explained its branches. This silence makes every interpretation a cautious guess, every theory a story built on the shifting sand of symbolism. It grants Sanxingdui a mysterious purity, but it also ensures their true story, in their own words, may be lost forever, leaving only the magnificent, silent wreckage of their faith for us to ponder. Their silent artistry was matched by the scale of their ambition in stone and earth. While the sacrificial pits tell a story of spiritual climax, the ground beneath them holds the blueprint of their daily power. Sanxingdui was not just a ceremonial site for occasional rituals. It was a massive, fortified capital city, a metropolis built to last. Encircling the heart of the settlement are the remains of immense rammed earth walls. These were not simple fences. They were defensive structures built by pounding layer upon layer of soil and gravel into wooden frames until it hardened like concrete, creating barriers that could withstand sieges and declare territorial dominion. The walls enclosed a staggering area, roughly 3.5 square kilometers. To put that in perspective, that is larger than the entire Principality of Monaco. Within this vast protected space, archaeologists have mapped a city of startling organization and complexity. This was not a haphazard collection of huts. It was a carefully planned urban engine, revealing a society with a powerful central authority capable of mobilizing thousands of workers for decades. The city was divided into distinct, specialized zones, a hallmark of advanced state-level organization. In one sector, they have found the foundations of numerous houses, the residential quarters where the ordinary citizens lived and worked. In another area, the soil tells a different story. The ground is stained with traces of copper and tin, and littered with fragments of clay molds, crucibles, and slag, the unmistakable debris of a massive bronze foundry. This was their industrial heart, the factory where the great masks and trees were dreamed into reality. The scale of production here was industrial. It required a steady supply of raw ores which had to be mined and transported, and a large, skilled workforce of artisans, each specializing in a different step of the complex lost wax and piece mold casting process. The existence of this dedicated workshop district proves that creating those magnificent bronzes was not a rare, mystical event, but a core, ongoing economic and religious activity. Perhaps most telling is evidence of a palatial complex, a raised platform of packed earth and carefully arranged foundations situated in a more central, possibly privileged location. While no throne room has survived the millennia, the size and positioning of these structures suggest an administrative and residential center for the elite, likely the very priest-kings depicted in gold and bronze. From here, rulers could oversee the city's functions, manage the distribution of grain and goods, and command the rituals that defined their world. But the genius of Sanxingdui's planning extends beyond zoning. This city was engineered for its environment. Sichuan is a land of rivers and heavy seasonal rains. The builders of Sanxingdui understood this intimately. They constructed an elaborate system of waterways, drainage ditches, and possibly even early flood control channels within the city walls. This was not merely for convenience. It was a matter of survival and stability, allowing them to manage the water that could nourish their fields or, if unleashed, destroy their homes. Such sophisticated hydraulic engineering is the mark of a society thinking generations ahead, investing collective labor into long-term civic infrastructure. Every rammed earth wall, every foundry hearth, every drainage ditch silently shouts the same truth. Sanxingdui was not a strange cultural fluke on the periphery of the ancient world. It was the beating heart of a powerful, organized, and wealthy state. It commanded resources, labor, and technical knowledge on a scale that rivals any of its celebrated contemporaries. The people who lived here were not primitive mysticians living in the shadow of greater civilizations to the east. They were urbanites, engineers, metallurgists, and administrators, living in a capital that buzzed with industry and purpose, all in service to a spiritual vision so compelling it ultimately demanded the city's greatest treasures be broken and buried. The walls prove they built for permanence, yet their final act was one of deliberate termination. What could threaten a city this strong, this well prepared from within its own walls? The walls of their city prove they could organize labor, but the metal in their pits reveals a mind capable of bending physics and chemistry to their will. To create the colossal standing figure or the immense sacred tree, the artisans of Sanxingdui relied on a technique known as piece mold casting. This was not a simple pour of liquid metal into a single cavity. It was an engineering puzzle of breathtaking complexity, performed on a scale unmatched anywhere in the world at that time. First, a full-scale model of the statue would be sculpted from clay. This model was then carefully covered with a layer of clay to create a negative mold, which was cut into sections and removed. These individual mold pieces were then fired into hard, durable tiles. But here was the genius. To cast a hollow statue, they had to create an inner core. They would take the original clay model, shave it down evenly to reduce its size, and then reassemble the fired mold pieces around this smaller core, leaving a narrow, perfectly even gap between the inner core and the outer mold. This gap, often no thicker than a few centimeters, was where the molten bronze would flow. Imagine the precision required. Every curve of a face, every fold in a robe, every detail on that massive standing figure had to be perfectly mirrored in that narrow space. If the core shifted even slightly during the pour, the bronze would fill unevenly, creating a weak spot or a catastrophic failure. The pour itself was a monumental undertaking. The amount of bronze needed for just the standing figure is estimated to be several hundred kilograms. For all the objects in just one sacrificial pit, the total weight of metal likely ran into multiple tons. This was not a backyard operation. It required a foundry with large, permanent furnaces capable of reaching the intense temperatures needed to melt copper and tin together, and a small army of workers to manage the dangerous, coordinated pour. The alloy they created was itself a marvel of consistent chemistry. Analysis shows their bronze was a carefully controlled mixture, typically around 80% copper and 15% tin, with small amounts of lead. This specific recipe produced a metal that was strong yet fluid when molten, and which cooled with a beautiful silvery golden hue. This consistency across hundreds of objects cast over generations tells us they had mastered their recipe, treating metallurgy as a repeatable science. Where did all this metal come from? Copper and tin ores are not found in the Sichuan basin. This means every kilogram of bronze represents a triumph of logistics. The copper likely came from mines in neighboring Yunnan province. Tin, a rarer and more critical ingredient for making bronze, may have traveled even farther, perhaps from deposits in what is now the Southwest or even Southeast Asia. To acquire these raw materials in such staggering volume, Sanxingdui must have controlled mining regions outright or commanded trade routes that stretched like arteries across the mountainous landscape, bringing the essential lifeblood of their civilization to the foundry gates. Alongside this mastery of bronze, they displayed an exquisite touch with a very different metal. The gold foil on the sun disk and the scepter is astonishingly thin, hammered to a delicate fragility. This technique, known as gold leafing, requires immense patience and skill. They likely started with a small ingot of native gold, repeatedly heating and hammering it on a hard, smooth anvil, folding and re-hammering to spread the metal without tearing it. The final product is a sheet so thin it clings to an object almost like a second skin, held by adhesive or the tightness of its own wrap. To gild the colossal bronze mask with its complex curves and protruding eyes was an act of precision matching the casting itself. This dual mastery of metals tells a complete story. They commanded the brute force and industrial scale needed to dominate bronze, and they wielded the delicate, patient artistry required to conquer gold. One metal built their gods, the other clothed them in light. Together, they proved this was not a culture of accidental genius, but a society that had institutionalized innovation, turning the manipulation of Earth's treasures into the highest expression of their power and faith. Their mastery of metals was not an end in itself, but a means to build a universe. From the silent array of artifacts, we can begin to piece together the grand cosmology of Sanxingdui, a spiritual architecture as complex and intentional as their city walls. At the very center of this belief system stood the bronze sacred tree. It was far more than a sculpture. It was a cosmic map, a three-dimensional diagram of reality. Its roots, entwined with the dragon, plunged into the watery underworld, the realm of chthonic powers and perhaps the ancestors. Its sturdy trunk passed through the middle world, the earthly plane of humanity, of cities and fields. And its highest branches, where the 9 birds perched, reached into the celestial realm, the domain of the sun, moon, and stars. This tree was their axis mundi, the central pillar around which all of existence rotated. It provided a path for spirits to travel and for human prayers to ascend. The sun disk gives us the name of one of their most important celestial powers. That gilded wheel is a direct representation of a solar deity, a god whose light and life-giving energy governed the cycles of day and season. Its prominence suggests sun worship was central, possibly the highest form of veneration in their pantheon. Then we have the masks, those faces with tubular eyes and winged ears. These are likely the eye deities, the all-seeing witnesses. In many ancient cultures, exaggerated eyes symbolize supernatural sight, the ability to perceive truth, to watch over humanity, and to see into the spirit world. These masks may represent specific gods who served as celestial judges or guardians, their extended vision missing nothing in the 3 realms connected by the sacred tree. The animals are not mere decoration. They are vital messengers and guides. The birds perched on the tree are solar symbols, creatures that can fly effortlessly between the earthly and heavenly realms, carrying messages or embodying the sun itself. The dragon coiled at the tree's base is a creature of 2 worlds. It is linked to water, to the deep earth, and to transformative power. It may have served as a protector of the tree's roots and a guide for souls descending into or rising from the underworld. Even the ivory tusks, offerings from elephants, could symbolize strength, memory, and a connection to the lush, primordial south, another layer of their symbolic geography. This elaborate cosmology points to a very specific kind of society. Sanxingdui was almost certainly a theocracy, a state where religious and political power were fused into one. The gold-sheathed scepter tells this story clearly. The figure who held it was not just a king, but the chief shaman, the supreme mediator. He stood at the trunk of the world tree. His role was to traverse these spiritual realms, to communicate with the eye deities and the sun god, to intercede with the ancestors in the deep, and to bring back divine favor for his people. The ritual regalia were his tools. He may have worn a smaller, wearable version of the colossal masks during ceremonies, allowing the spirit of the deity to speak through him. He would stand before the gilded sun disk, reflecting its light, embodying its power. He was the living hinge between the human and the divine, and his authority was absolute because it was bestowed by the cosmos itself. This brings us at last to the chilling purpose of the sacrificial pits. Within this reconstructed worldview, those pits were not a burial ground for objects. They were the largest, most dramatic ritual act imaginable. They represent a massive, desperate communication with the gods or ancestors. Think of it as sending a message, but written in the most expensive ink in the world. The breaking of the objects was not vandalism, it was a release. By shattering the sacred masks, they were releasing the spiritual essence of the eye deities back to the heavens, perhaps to carry an urgent plea. By burning and burying the symbols of the priest-king's power, they were terminating an old covenant, a broken contract with the divine. The systematic layering of ivory, bronze, and ash was a coded prayer, a physical signal sent downward through the layers of the earth to the underworld and upward through the smoke to the sky. What message was so critical it required the destruction of their entire spiritual arsenal? Was the sacred tree, their connection to the gods, failing? Had the sun god turned his face away, bringing drought or famine? Was the dynasty of priest-kings losing its divine mandate, requiring a total reset of cosmic order? The pits are the final, screaming sentence of a story whose beginning we can only guess. They sacrificed their most cherished conduits to the divine in a last attempt to fix a broken universe. The silence that followed was eternal. Their desperate prayer was sent into a world already dominated by another great power. To the north and east, beyond the formidable Qinling Mountains, the Shang Dynasty ruled the central plains of China. For centuries, these two civilizations existed as contemporaries, both masters of bronze, yet they built their worlds as if they lived on different planets. The relationship between Sanxingdui and the Shang is one of the most tantalizing puzzles in ancient history. Were they bitter rivals, cautious trading partners, or simply two brilliant stars burning in isolated galaxies? The artifacts provide a conflicted answer, a story told in both stark contrast and subtle connection. The differences are immediate and profound. Walk into a Shang tomb and you are surrounded by ritual vessels. Elaborate tripod cauldrons called ding, elegant wine goblets like the gu, and food containers known as gui. These objects are covered in intricate patterns, most famously the tauti, a stylized animal mask. Their purpose was central to Shang's spirituality, communicating with and honoring royal ancestors. The king would make offerings of food and wine in these vessels, seeking guidance and legitimacy from his lineage. Now look into the Sanxingdui pits. You will search in vain for a single ding or gui. Not one has ever been found. This is not an archaeological accident. It is a deafening statement of cultural independence. The people of Sanxingdui did not venerate their ancestors in the same way, if at all. Their religious focus was not on the royal dead, but on a pantheon of active, present gods, the all-seeing eye deities, the sun disk, the world tree. Their rituals required not vessels for offerings, but monumental statues and masks for divine manifestation. This is a fundamental schism in worldview. Yet they shared the same revolutionary technology, advanced bronze casting. Both cultures used the piece mold technique to create their masterpieces. This shared knowledge is a critical clue. It suggests some form of contact, however indirect. Technological ideas are like seeds, they need a path to travel. Perhaps knowledge of metallurgy drifted south along river valleys or was carried by itinerant artisans. The Shang prized jade and cowrie shells from distant regions, proving they engaged in long-distance exchange networks. It is entirely possible that the technical know-how for bronze casting reached Sichuan through these diffused channels, where it then blossomed into something utterly unique. We see this pattern in the jade artifacts. The presence of Shang-style zhang blades and ancient Liangzhu-style kong at Sanxingdui shows they were aware of and respected certain ritual forms from other cultures, adopting them into their own symbolic language. They were connected enough to receive ideas, but confident enough to utterly transform them. So was their conflict. The massive defensive walls around Sanxingdui city suggest they feared someone. Could it have been the powerful Shang seeking to expand their dominion? Ancient Shang oracle bones record military campaigns against surrounding tribes, though none clearly name a place like Sichuan. A direct invasion over the mountain passes would have been a colossal undertaking. A more plausible threat might have been economic or political pressure. If the Shang controlled key trade routes for tin or other vital resources, they could have strangled Sanxingdui's bronze production, undermining the very foundation of the priestly elite's power. This could have triggered an internal crisis, a loss of faith in the rulers who could no longer commune effectively with the gods to ensure prosperity. The final act in the pits, the destruction of the bronze gods themselves, feels like a response to an existential threat. But it is crucial to note, there is no evidence of Shang weapons or Shang-style destruction at the Sanxingdui site. No arrowheads from northern armies, no layers of conquest ash. If the Shang were involved in Sanxingdui's fall, it was likely as a distant, destabilizing force in a complex web of events, not as a conquering army that sacked the city. Ultimately, these two civilizations represent two answers to the same human questions. The Shang sought order through lineage and ancestral precedent, their art serving a conservative, ritual tradition. Sanxingdui sought power through direct, ecstatic connection to the cosmos, their art breaking all scales of imagination. They were not isolated, but they were fiercely independent, using shared technology to build a spiritual universe that stood in brilliant, defiant contrast to all their neighbors. Their mysterious end, therefore, may not have come from a northern enemy, but from the terrifying realization that their own magnificent bridge to the gods had somehow failed. For nearly 2 decades, the story seemed complete. 2 sacrificial pits, a trove of unimaginable artifacts, and a silence that stretched for 3,000 years. Then, in 2019, the ground spoke again. Archaeologists, using modern survey techniques, detected anomalies in the soil just meters from the original discoveries. What they began to uncover between 2019 and 2022 would rewrite the Sanxingdui narrative once more, not with a footnote but with an entire new chapter. They designated them Pits 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. The scale was staggering. These were not minor additions, they were a whole new sacrificial complex, confirming that the original 2 pits were not a solitary event, but part of a vast ritual landscape used over generations. The new finds were a breathtaking blend of the familiar and the utterly unprecedented. From the soil emerged more gold, including a stunning, nearly complete gold mask. Unlike the colossal bronze faces, this mask was life-sized, thin as foil, and crafted for a human wearer, perhaps a supreme priest during the final ceremony. There were new bronze creations of dizzying complexity. One artifact, a bronze altar, depicts miniature figures carrying a sacred object up a tiered platform, a possible snapshot of the very rituals performed at the site. But the star discovery was something no one had ever seen before. From Pit 7, researchers carefully extracted a rectangular bronze box. It was not large, but its craftsmanship was exquisite. The sides were decorated with a turtle shell pattern, and most astonishingly, it had hinged lids and jade artifacts inside, preserved as if placed there yesterday. This was not a statue or a mask. It was a container, a relic box, suggesting a level of ritual sophistication and precious object curation they had never before associated with Sanxingdui. Each new pit added layers to the mystery. The careful arrangement of ivory, the types of artifacts placed together, and the order of the layers began to reveal a ritual grammar. It became clear that these sacrificial acts were not a single, panicked response to a disaster, but likely a recurring, institutionalized practice, perhaps tied to royal succession, major calendar cycles, or attempts to avert recurring crises. The new discoveries proved Sanxingdui's ritual life was even richer, longer, and more complex than we ever dreamed. But if these pits showed a civilization at its height, another discovery, made years earlier just 30 miles away in modern Chengdu, would show what might have happened after the fall. In 2001, construction workers unearthed a golden sun disk and a stone tiger statue. This was the Jinsha site. Excavations revealed a large settlement that thrived from around 1000 to 600 before the Common Era, directly in the chronological wake of Sanxingdui's decline. The artistic connection is undeniable, but the style has shifted. At Jinsha, you find the same sun disk motif, but smaller, more refined. You find gold masks, but they are thinner, more delicate. The overwhelming, monumental terror of Sanxingdui's art is gone, replaced by a lighter, more elegant aesthetic. Most tellingly, the colossal bronze masks and the sacred tree are absent. Jinsha did not continue the grand tradition of casting gigantic gods. Instead, they focused on jade, stone, and ivory carvings of breathtaking detail. This was not a direct copy, but a cultural evolution. scholars see Jinsha as the most likely successor state, a community that may have included refugees, artisans, and priests from fallen Sanxingdui. They carried with them the core of their beliefs, the sun worship, the use of gold, and the reverence for certain animal spirits, but they adapted. Perhaps the old theocratic system, with its demanding and catastrophic rituals, had collapsed. The new society at Jinsha may have decentralized power or found different ways to commune with the divine that did not require the shattering of a world. The journey from the monumental pits of Sanxingdui to the refined treasures of Jinsha feels like watching the aftermath of a supernova. The brilliant, concentrated flash of one civilization gives way to a glowing, dispersed remnant, its light changed but unmistakably born from the same source. The discovery of the new pits deepens the mystery of the climax, while Jinsha offers a haunting glimpse of what survived the end. The gold mask from Pit 5 weighs more than half a pound. Unearthed in 2021, it is not a full face, but a stunning, heavy sheet of gold designed to cover the front of a life-sized bronze head. Its discovery was a quiet revolution. For decades, we believed Sanxingdui's gold was primarily thin foil, a delicate skin applied to wood or bronze. This mask, thick and substantial, proved they also worked gold in a far more sculptural way. Its weight alone speaks of immense value, a concentration of wealth meant for a singular, powerful purpose. The mask's features are a masterclass in stylized abstraction. It has the same elongated, rectangular shape as the colossal bronze masks, with almond-shaped eye holes and a solemn, closed mouth, but the execution is different. Where the bronze masks have protruding, tubular eyes, this gold face is smooth, its gaze implied by the empty slits. The ears are not wildly exaggerated wings, but more refined, stylized curves. This is not a copy, it is a variation on a sacred theme, perhaps a different register of divinity. So who did this mask represent? One compelling theory is that it depicts a different deity within their pantheon. If the colossal bronze masks with their bulging eyes represent the all-seeing eye gods, this smoother, more restrained gold face might belong to a solar deity, its surface meant to catch and reflect actual sunlight, becoming a living disk. Another possibility is that this was the ritual face of the highest priest king himself. Imagine the ceremony. A bronze head cast with the same solemn features would be brought forth. Then this heavy gold mask would be carefully fitted over it, perhaps secured with cords through small holes along its edges. In the flickering torchlight, the transformation would be electrifying. The bronze beneath would give the face structure and permanence, while the gold overlay would ignite with a fiery, otherworldly glow. The wearer, whether a human priest or a statue representing a god, would become a being of two worlds, solid and ephemeral, earthly and divine. This single artifact deepens our understanding of their ritual technology. It shows they were not just attaching gold foil, they were engineering composite divine images, layering materials for specific symbolic and visual effects. The obsession with the face, the ultimate locus of identity and expression, reaches its zenith here. In Sanxingdui's world, to control the representation of a face was to channel the power of the spirit it embodied. This gold mask is the ultimate ritual interface, a conduit hammered from the most precious metal on earth, waiting for 3,000 years to show us that their conversation with the gods was even more layered and more brilliant than we ever knew. That heavy gold mask was meant to be seen, but some of the newest artifacts were made to be read. From the fresh sacrificial pits came objects that did more than embody gods. They seemed to illustrate the very acts of worship themselves, offering what might be the closest thing we have to an instruction manual for their vanished faith. Two discoveries stand out as revolutionary puzzles. The first is a multi-tiered bronze altar, a structure of breathtaking narrative complexity. It is not a single statue but a miniature stage. The altar rises in three distinct tiers, each populated by tiny, intricately cast figures. On the bottom level, two mythic beasts with wings and curling tails stand as solemn guardians. The middle tier features four human-like figures, each holding an object aloft with an attitude of reverence, as if in procession. At the very top, a final platform holds a small, shrine-like structure. The entire piece is a frozen moment, a diorama in bronze. It does not just symbolize power, it depicts the performance of power. Scholars believe this could be a literal snapshot of a major ceremony, perhaps showing priests carrying a sacred object, like a ritual scepter or a smaller deity figure, up the levels of an actual altar during a great festival. It visualizes the hierarchy of their ritual world, from the animalistic powers below to the human intermediaries, culminating in the sacred space at the summit where the divine would manifest. This tiny, intricate scene gives us a cast of characters and a script, moving us from abstract worship to enacted drama. The second artifact is quieter, but in some ways even more revealing. From pit number 7, archaeologists extracted a unique bronze box. It is rectangular, about the size of a modern laptop, and its craftsmanship is shockingly sophisticated. The sides are decorated with a pattern resembling a turtle's shell, a symbol often associated with longevity and the cosmos in later Chinese thought. Most astonishingly, the box was constructed with hinged lids, a complex piece of joinery that shows an advanced understanding of metalworking. Inside, carefully placed, were several beautiful jade artifacts. This object changes everything. For decades, we viewed Sanxingdui through the lens of monumental public spectacle, the colossal masks and towering figures meant for communal awe. This box is different. It is intimate. It is for storage, for safekeeping, for the careful curation of sacred items. The hinged lid implies something meant to be opened and closed, accessed and secured, perhaps by a specific priestly caste. The jade inside was not sacrificed through destruction, but preserved with reverence. This box suggests a hidden, meticulous side to their spirituality, a layer of ritual practice that was organized, sequential, and possibly secret, existing alongside the public, explosive ceremonies that ended in the pits. Together, the altar and the box represent a quantum leap in our understanding. They move us from static symbols to narrative art and ritual technology. The altar shows the ceremony, the box hints at its preparation and paraphernalia. They are no longer just showing us their gods, they are showing us their priests at work, handling the sacred machinery of their belief. The interpretive challenge is immense, but for the first time, it feels like we are not just staring at a finished painting. We are finding the sketched outlines beneath it, the blueprint for how their breathtaking spiritual universe was actually operated. If we could decipher these blueprints, what startling truths might they hold about the final, catastrophic performance that required burying the entire set? The altar and the box show us their rituals, but the soil itself reveals the texture of their daily wealth. In the newest sacrificial pits, archaeologists made a discovery so delicate it was almost invisible. Using powerful microscopes, they examined the mineralized crust on a bronze artifact and found something astonishing: traces of silk, not just any silk, but woven fabric of remarkable quality. This single finding quietly rewrites history. For centuries, the story of silk began with the Shang Dynasty in northern China. But these microscopic threads, preserved for over 3,000 years in the sacrificial clay of Sichuan, prove that the people of Sanxingdui were not only using silk, they were likely producing and trading it at the same time, if not earlier. Silk was not merely cloth. In the ancient world, it was the ultimate luxury, a symbol of status, divinity, and immense economic power. For Sanxingdui's priests to wrap their sacred bronzes in silk before breaking and burying them was an act of staggering opulence. It tells us this society commanded not just metal and jade, but the sophisticated, labor-intensive agriculture of sericulture, the cultivation of silkworms and the weaving of their threads. This places them at the heart of a luxury goods network, producing a commodity as valuable as gold, which could have been traded across the mountains for other vital resources. This silk connects to the older, more obvious symbol of wealth, the mountains of ivory. We have always known about the tusks, but modern science has given them a new voice. Genetic studies on the preserved ivory confirm what was long suspected. These were Asian elephant tusks, but the analysis goes further, suggesting the elephants likely came from multiple herds, possibly from different regions south of Sichuan. This is not the spoils of a single hunt. It is the harvested bounty of a sustained, systematic trade relationship. Acquiring hundreds of large tusks required a stable, long-term network, a pipeline of luxury flowing into the city. Imagine the caravans, porters and traders navigating steep mountain paths or floating down rivers, carrying these heavy, precious shafts of ivory, along with bundles of raw silk, cakes of tin, and blocks of jade. They would arrive at the gates of Sanxingdui, a city that must have buzzed like a Bronze Age trading hub. In exchange, Sanxingdui likely sent out its own exquisite products, finely cast bronze ritual items, perhaps salt from local wells, and of course, its legendary silk. This flow of goods paints a picture of a political economy of breathtaking scale and control. The ruling priest kings did not just oversee rituals, they managed a complex economic engine. They secured the raw materials for their bronze industry from distant mines. They monopolized the trade in ivory, a substance revered for its spiritual purity and durability. They likely controlled the production of silk, a technology that requires organized mulberry farming and skilled weavers. All of this wealth was concentrated in a single, fertile basin, a geographical gift that the ancient Chinese poetically called the country of heaven's storehouse. The Sichuan basin is ringed by protective mountains, creating a natural fortress. Inside, the climate is mild, the soil rich, and the Min River provided water and transport. This was a land capable of producing agricultural surplus, feeding the thousands of workers who built the walls, cast the bronzes, and wove the silk. The wealth from trade combined with the bounty from the land created the perfect conditions for an extravagant, theocratic state to flourish. They were not just spiritually rich, they were materially overflowing, sitting at the crossroads of luxury and faith, using the treasures of a continent to build a bridge to their gods. And when that bridge was deemed to have failed, they sacrificed not just their art, but the very symbols of their earthly prosperity. The silk, the ivory, the bronze, burying their entire economy in an act of ultimate devotion. What kind of crisis could make a society so wealthy, so secure in its fortress of abundance, decide that all its treasures were suddenly worthless? Their wealth could not protect them from the sky or the earth. The civilization that commanded bronze and silk met an end so complete, its final act was to bury its own heart. Why? The leading theories are not just guesses, they are stories written in soil and silt, each trying to explain the silence that followed the last ritual fire. The first story is written in water. Geological cores taken from around the Sanxingdui site reveal thick, uniform layers of silt and clay deposited suddenly across the ancient landscape. This is the signature of a catastrophic flood, one that could have burst the banks of the nearby Min River or been triggered by a massive landslide upstream. Imagine a wall of water and mud sweeping through the basin, inundating fields, choking irrigation channels, and drowning the lower quarters of the city. In the aftermath, the salt flats they relied on would be ruined, the agricultural base destroyed. Famine would follow. Such a disaster would shatter the social contract. If the priest king, the mediator to the gods, could not prevent this devastation, his divine mandate would evaporate. The final ritual in the pits could then be seen as a desperate, last-ditch offering to appease the furious water spirits, a sacrifice of everything precious to beg for the floods to recede. The broken world tree, a plea to restore the cosmic order the waters had upended. The second theory rumbles from below. The Sichuan basin sits on a major seismic zone. A powerful earthquake could have toppled buildings, shattered the great rammed earth walls, and triggered landslides that blocked rivers, causing secondary floods. The psychological impact would be profound. The very ground, the foundation of their world, had become unstable and treacherous. If their rituals could not steady the earth, then perhaps the gods required a more profound sacrifice. The systematic destruction and burial might have been an attempt to literally weigh down the spirits, to anchor a trembling world with the heaviest offerings they possessed. The bronze gods themselves sunk into the pit to calm the land. The third story is written in the language of conflict. Could war have ended them? The massive city walls were built for a reason. An invasion, perhaps by the powerful Shang Dynasty to the north seeking control of trade routes, could have breached their defenses. Or maybe the conflict was internal, a bloody rebellion of the lower classes against the wealthy priestly elite who hoarded bronze and ivory. In either scenario, the ruling class faced annihilation. If enemy forces were at the gates, the priests might have chosen to destroy their most sacred objects rather than let them be captured and desecrated, preserving their spiritual power by returning it to the earth. If it was rebellion, the pits could be the victor's act, systematically erasing the religious symbols of the old regime to cement a new order. Yet there is a problem with the war theory. The archaeological record shows no evidence of a violent sack, no layers of widespread burning across the city, no mass graves filled with the victims of battle, no foreign weapons littering the streets. The destruction is concentrated, ritualized, and incredibly expensive, which leads us to the fourth and perhaps most compelling theory. This was not a reaction to an external force, but an internal religious revolution. Think of it as a theological cataclysm. What if the people or a new faction of priests simply lost faith? After generations, perhaps the old rituals stopped working. Droughts persisted, earthquakes recurred, children still died. The grand bargain with the eye deities and the sun god seemed broken. In a crisis of belief, the decision might have been made to terminate the old covenant entirely. The gods had failed, so their physical representations had to be decommissioned, their power ritually discharged and buried. This was not an act of despair, but one of terrifying spiritual logic. By shattering the masks, they released the deities from their service. By breaking the world tree, they collapsed the old cosmos to make space for a new one. The careful, layered burial was a funeral for a failed belief system. The evidence in the pits leans heavily toward this final idea. The destruction was too methodical, too symbolic, and too complete to be the panicked act of a society under immediate physical attack. They took the time to break everything in a specific way, to layer ivory and bronze and ash according to a sacred script. This points to a planned, priestly directed termination, a conscious end chosen by the civilization itself. Whether triggered by an environmental disaster that shook their faith or a slow erosion of belief, the final act was a religious one. They did not hide their treasures for later recovery. They killed their gods to save their souls, and in doing so, they vanished from history, leaving only the echoes of their magnificent doubt buried in the Sichuan earth. Their magnificent doubt left a void, but nature and culture both abhor a vacuum. If the people of Sanxingdui did not simply die out, where did they go? A compelling answer lies just 30 miles to the southeast, in what is now the bustling heart of modern Chengdu. Here, at a place called Jinsha, a different kind of treasure was unearthed beginning in 2001. This site thrived from roughly 1200 to 650 before the Common Era, a timeline that begins almost directly in the wake of Sanxingdui's ritual termination. The artifacts from Jinsha are not a carbon copy, but they speak a familiar dialect. The connection is undeniable, yet profoundly transformed. This has led to the migration hypothesis, the idea that the Sanxingdui civilization did not vanish but relocated, carrying the core of their culture to a new home and adapting it for a new age. At Jinsha, you will not find a towering bronze figure or a colossal mask with tubular eyes. The overwhelming, intimidating scale of Sanxingdui's art is conspicuously absent. Instead, the artistic language shifts from the monumental to the meticulous. the people of Jinsha became masters of the miniature and the refined. They produced exquisite carvings in jade and stone, delicate gold ornaments, and hauntingly beautiful stone sculptures of kneeling figures and crouching tigers. But woven through this new aesthetic are the unmistakable threads of the old belief system. The most iconic link is the sun disk. At Jinsha, they too crafted a circular gold foil disk with a central hub and radiating sunbeams. But it is smaller, more intricate, and was found alongside a perfectly matched bronze disk that fits behind it, suggesting a composite ceremonial object of incredible sophistication. The solar deity was still worshipped, but perhaps in a more intimate, ritualized manner. Other motifs carry over. The bird, that solar messenger from the branches of the Sanxingdui sacred tree, appears everywhere at Jinsha, intricately carved into stone plaques and gold foil. Ivory, that symbol of immense wealth and trade, is also present, though in smaller, carved pieces rather than whole tusks piled by the hundreds. The use of gold continues, but it is applied with a lighter, more decorative touch. This is not a broken tradition, it is an evolved one. The migration theory suggests that following the crisis at Sanxingdui, whether flood, earthquake, or spiritual collapse, the ruling elite, the priests, the artisans, and a significant portion of the population undertook a deliberate exodus. They moved their cultural capital to Jinsha, taking their most vital spiritual symbols and technical knowledge with them. Why would their art change so dramatically? The shift from gigantic, awe-inspiring bronzes to smaller, portable treasures may reflect a change in both circumstance and ideology. The creation of Sanxingdui's monumental art required a staggering concentration of resources, a theocratic state with absolute control over mines, trade routes, and thousands of laborers. That centralized industrial-scale system may have been shattered by whatever caused the abandonment. At Jinsha, perhaps power was more dispersed, or the new leaders lacked the same overwhelming authority to command such projects. The focus on smaller, exquisite objects suggests a society where sacred power was more personalized, perhaps distributed among a broader elite rather than concentrated in a single, god-like priest-king. There is also the possibility of new cultural influences. Jinsha's location placed it at a different crossroads. While Sanxingdui may have been somewhat isolated in its fertile basin, Jinsha was more open to the flow of people and ideas from the south and east. The elegant, detailed style of Jinsha's jade carvings shows technical and artistic influences that feel distinct from Sanxingdui's brutalist bronze grandeur. This could indicate that the migrating Sanxingdui people integrated with other local groups, or were influenced by new trade partners, creating a hybrid culture. The terrifying gods of the old mountain fortress were softened, refined, and adapted for life in a new, perhaps more cosmopolitan, river plain settlement. The migration hypothesis offers a satisfying narrative of continuity. It turns a mysterious extinction into a story of resilience and adaptation. The people did not disappear, they transformed. They traded the overwhelming physical presence of their gods for a more intricate, perhaps more accessible, spiritual practice. The world tree was dismantled, but the sun still rose, and the golden bird still flew, now captured in delicate stone and gold. It suggests that the final ritual at Sanxingdui was not an end, but a painful rebirth. They buried their old world to save its soul, carrying the embers of their faith to a new hearth where they burned differently but no less brightly. The refined treasures of Jinsha show a culture evolving, but its origins remain fiercely debated. The most controversial question is also the simplest. Where did Sanxingdui's startling vision come from? When you place their art beside anything from Bronze Age China, it feels like an intrusion from another world. The Shang Dynasty crafted intricate patterns and stylized animal masks. Sanxingdui produced hyper-stylized humanoid faces with buggling eyes and wings for ears. The contrast is so stark it forces a radical theory. Could influences from outside of China have shaped this unique civilization? Some scholars look at those elongated, almost alien masks and see distant echoes. They point to artifacts from the ancient Near East, where gods were sometimes depicted with exaggerated, staring eyes to symbolize all-seeing power. They note the prominence of gold, a metal the Shang largely ignored, but which was revered by cultures across the Eurasian steppes from Siberia to the Black Sea. The technique of hammering gold into thin foil for ceremonial regalia finds stronger parallels in those western regions than in the central plains of China. Even the iconic sun disk, while a universal symbol, bears a striking resemblance in its spoke design to solar imagery found in Central Asian cultures. The most tantalizing potential link is the gold-sheathed scepter. The idea of a ruler's staff as a symbol of authority is global, but the specific narrative depicted on the Sanxingdui scepter, with its layered imagery of fish, birds, and crowned heads, suggests a cosmology of layered worlds. This concept of an axis mundi, a world tree or pillar connecting underworld, earth, and heaven, is a cornerstone of Siberian shamanism, not a dominant feature of early Chinese Shang religion. Could tenuous threads of this belief have traveled along the vast, grassy highways of the steppe, carried by nomadic traders or migrating groups over thousands of miles? The geography makes this seem impossible. Sichuan is a basin ringed by some of the most formidable mountains on Earth, the Himalayas to the west and the Kinling Range to the north. Yet these barriers were not absolute. Archaeologists know that precious goods like jade and cowrie shells moved over astonishing distances in antiquity. The ivory in the pits came from the south. The tin for their bronze likely came from the southwest or beyond. If raw materials could travel, so could ideas, passed hand to hand like a precious stone, slowly transforming over the long journey. A motif from a Siberian shaman's drum could, over centuries, become the blueprint for a Sichuan bronze tree. A story about an all-seeing god could morph into the design for a mask with tubular eyes. This does not require a mass migration or a conquering army. It requires only the slow, diffuse seepage of cultural concepts along trade routes, what scholars call stimulus diffusion. The people of Sanxingdui would not have been copying foreign art. They would have been listening to whispers from afar, then using their own incredible skill and spiritual fervor to build something entirely new from those fragments. The debate ultimately leads to a middle ground. Direct contact with Mesopotamia or Siberia is highly unlikely, but Sanxingdui's location was not a dead end. It was a cul-de-sac at the end of a very long road, a basin that could collect ideas washed down from the northern steppes and up from the southern tropics. They were brilliant synthesizers. They took the bronze technology likely filtered from the north, the ivory and jade from the south, and perhaps the spiritual concept of a world axis from northwestern traditions, and fused it all in the crucible of their own genius. They were not a colony of a foreign power. They were a unique fusion point where the converging streams of ancient Eurasia pooled and then erupted in a geyser of creativity unlike anything before or since. Their isolation allowed them to develop this fusion in spectacular ways, free from the dominant artistic rules of the Central Plains. This makes them not a mysterious outlier, but a vital reminder that the ancient world was far more interconnected, and human creativity far more unpredictable than our old maps of civilization ever allowed. That fusion point in Sichuan forces us to redraw the map of ancient China. For over a century, the dominant historical narrative was clear and singular. Chinese civilization, it was said, had a single cradle, the Yellow River Basin. From that northern heartland, the story went. Culture and technology rippled outward, slowly enlightening the peripheral barbarians in the south and west. The Shang Dynasty was the glorious proof, its oracle bones and ritual vessels representing the one true origin of everything that would become China. Sanxingdui shatters that model completely. It did not receive civilization from the north. It built its own in parallel with equal brilliance and a radically different vision. We are not looking at a cultural backwater waiting for enlightenment from the Yellow River. We are witnessing a second cradle, a powerhouse of innovation and spirituality that thrived in the Yangtze River basin to the south. This discovery transforms Chinese prehistory from a single, linear story into a vibrant, contested landscape of multiple advanced societies. The ancient Shu culture of Sichuan was not a derivative echo. It was a loud, confident voice in a Bronze Age chorus, one we had simply never heard before. This forces a profound re-evaluation of what we mean by civilization itself. We have long associated advanced society with the advent of writing. The Shang left written records, therefore they were civilized. Sanxingdui left none, so what were they? The sheer scale of their city, the complexity of their metallurgy, and the sophistication of their social organization provide a resounding answer. They were a civilization that chose a different path for transmitting knowledge and power. Theirs was an oral and visual culture of staggering potency. They invested their genius not in inscribed characters, but in monumental art designed for ritual performance. The towering statue was their law code, the sacred tree was their cosmology text, the ritual pit was their historical archive. To dismiss them as less advanced because they lacked writing is to ignore the evidence of their walls, their workshops, and their breathtaking artistry. They prove that a society can achieve staggering technical and social complexity through means other than literacy, communicating profound ideas through imagery, scale, and spectacle that could unite thousands in a shared belief system. The result is a new, mosaic understanding of ancient China. Instead of a single light spreading from one source, we must now picture a landscape dotted with many brilliant, independent fires. In the north, the Shang Dynasty burned with its ancestor worship and intricate bronze vessels. In the Sichuan basin, the Shu culture of Sanxingdui blazed with its shamanic kings and colossal gods. Further east, near the coast, the Liangzhu culture had already risen and fallen centuries earlier, leaving behind its own legacy of exquisite jade and early urbanism. These were not isolated bubbles, they were nodes in a network connected by tenuous but real threads of trade in ivory, jade, tin, and ideas. They influenced each other, as seen in the borrowed jade forms at Sanxingdui, but they fiercely maintained their own unique cultural identities. Ancient China was not born from one tribe or one river. It was forged in the interactions, conflicts, and syntheses between many diverse peoples, each contributing threads to the eventual tapestry. Sanxingdui, therefore, expands our definition of what Chinese civilization was in its formative periods. It challenges the very idea of a pure central origin. The cultural DNA of what would become China is far more mixed, more fascinating, and more complex than we ever knew. It includes the stern ancestor veneration of the Shang, but it must also make room for the ecstatic, visionary spirituality of the Shu. It encompasses the written word of the oracle bones, but it must also honor the powerful silence of the bronze masks. This lost civilization teaches us that the past is always more diverse, more surprising, and more imaginative than our textbooks can contain. Its rediscovery is not just about finding old treasure. It is about reclaiming a lost chapter of the human story, one that reminds us that greatness can flourish in many forms, and that sometimes the most powerful voices from the past are the ones that speak without words. The golden birds of Jinsha may show us a legacy, but they do not answer the core riddles of their ancestors. Even with pits 3 through 8 now excavated, Sanxingdui remains a constellation of profound mysteries, each one a puzzle that keeps archaeologists working late into the night. First, and perhaps most haunting, is the question of the dead. Where are the royal tombs? For a civilization of such immense wealth and social hierarchy, the absence of any grand burial chambers is bizarre. We have found the funeral for their gods, but not for their kings. Did they practice a form of burial that leaves no trace, like sky burial or cremation? Or is there a separate, hidden necropolis still waiting to be discovered, a valley of the kings that would finally give names to the faces in the bronze? Then there is the silence of their language. What did their writing system look like, if it even existed at all? The Shang Dynasty to the east was meticulously recording its history on oracle bones by the thousands. Sanxingdui has given us not a single inscribed character. Did they use a perishable medium like bamboo or silk that simply rotted away in the humid Sichuan climate? Or was theirs truly an oral and visual culture where knowledge was passed down through ritual performance and monumental art, making the standing figure itself a kind of three-dimensional text? Without writing, we cannot hear their names, their myths, or their own explanation for the world they built. We are left deciphering a prayer book where every page is a picture. The sacrificial pits themselves are a ritual we can see but cannot read. We know the sequence, the layering of ash, ivory, and shattered bronze. But what was the precise ceremony performed there? Who were the actors? What chants were spoken as the great mask was lowered into the earth? Was it a funeral for a god, a desperate plea to end a drought, or a cosmic reset at the end of a great calendar cycle? Each broken artifact is a word in a script we have lost, a stage direction for a play whose plot we can only guess. This extends to the most fundamental human connection, speech. What language did they speak? Was it a precursor to the ancient Shu language, or something entirely unrelated to any linguistic family we know in the region? The answer is locked within the shapes of their mouths on those bronze faces, forever closed. Even their most tangible achievement, the bronze work, holds technical secrets. We understand the piece mold process in theory, but the practical logistics still astound. How exactly was the bronze produced and assembled on such a monumental scale? Where was the massive central foundry that cast the 13-foot-tall sacred tree? How did they transport the hundreds of kilograms of molten metal from furnace to mold without a single flaw? The coordination was a feat of ancient industrial engineering that we have yet to fully replicate in our understanding. This is the enduring power of Sanxingdui. Every new discovery, like the bronze box with its hinged lid or the intricate altar, does not solve the mystery. It adds new layers of complexity. Each answered question spawns three more. The recent pits did not provide a Rosetta Stone. They gave us a new, beautifully illustrated book in a language we still cannot read. This ensures its place not as a problem to be solved, but as a premier archaeological enigma, a permanent reminder that the past is never fully knowable. It is a conversation across millennia where we ask our questions, and the earth replies with only more magnificent, silent riddles. That silent conversation has not stayed confined to academic journals. It has erupted into the global imagination, transforming Sanxingdui from an archaeological site into a modern legend. The artifacts themselves have become international celebrities touring the world's great museums. To stand before the actual standing figure in a hushed gallery is an experience that bypasses intellect and strikes directly at the senses. The sheer scale of it, the strange calm of its face, the intricate patterns on its robe under the museum lights, it feels less like viewing an artifact and more like a close encounter. These global exhibitions have done more than share treasures. They have created a shared sense of wonder. A visitor in London, Tokyo, or New York can stand in front of the same colossal mask and feel the same humbling question: who made this and why? This universal appeal has seeped into contemporary art and design. You can see the echo of those tubular eyes and elongated faces in avant-garde sculpture, in the costumes of major theater productions, and in the concept art for epic fantasy films. Designers borrow the hypnotic, geometric patterns from the bronze regalia. The aesthetic of Sanxingdui, that blend of the brutal and the refined, the alien and the ritualistic, has become a shorthand for ancient, mysterious power in the visual language of our time. Yet, alongside this artistic reverence, a more speculative fascination has flourished. In the vacuum of their written history, wilder theories have rushed in. For some, the otherworldly appearance of the masks is not symbolic but literal. They point to the elongated features and ask, could these be portraits of extraterrestrial visitors? Could the advanced bronze technology have been a gift from the stars? Others propose connections to mythical lost continents like Atlantis, or imagine Sanxingdui as the remnant of a global super-civilization that vanished after a great cataclysm. While archaeologists dismiss these ideas for lack of evidence, their persistence is incredibly revealing. They are not really about Sanxingdui, they are about us. They speak to a deep human itch, a profound discomfort with the silence. We are a species wired for narrative. We crave stories, names, motives, and endings. When a culture leaves behind physical objects of such staggering beauty and sophistication, but not a single word of explanation, it creates a cognitive itch we are desperate to scratch. The alien theory, for all its improbability, is an attempt to provide a complete, sensational answer. It fills the silence with a dramatic story. It transforms the unknown into a known, even if that known is fantastical. The true power of Sanxingdui, then, lies in this tension between the solid reality of its bronze and the infinite possibilities of its story. It forces us to sit with the unknown. It reminds us that history is not just a record of what was written down by the winners, but also a landscape of what was felt, believed, and spectacularly performed by those who left no letters. Their legacy is a challenge, an invitation to marvel not just at what they made, but at the vast, echoing space of what they chose not to say, a silence that somehow speaks louder than any king list ever could. That cognitive itch for a complete story is something we all share, yet the true legacy of Sanxingdui is not a single, satisfying answer, but the breathtaking journey of the question itself. It began with a single farmer's shovel striking jade in a quiet field. It led us into 2 dark pits and then 6 more, filled with a silent, shattered pantheon of bronze and gold. We have stood before masks with eyes that see beyond our world, traced the branches of a bronze tree that mapped the cosmos, and walked the rammed earth walls of a metropolis that commanded an ancient trade in ivory and silk. We have witnessed their final, devastating ritual, a performance where a civilization chose to bury its gods. Along the way, every discovery has rewritten a map. This was not a peripheral culture waiting for enlightenment from the north. It was a second cradle of Chinese civilization, a parallel universe of artistry and belief that thrived in the Yangtze Basin while the Shang Dynasty ruled the Yellow River Plains. Their story forces us to abandon the idea of a single, linear history. Instead, we must picture a Bronze Age world alive with many brilliant, diverse fires, each burning with its own unique light. The core mysteries remain stubborn and profound. We still do not know what they called themselves. We cannot read a single word they spoke. We have found no tombs for their kings, only a funeral for their deities. We can describe the methodical violence of the sacrificial pits, but we cannot hear the prayers that accompanied it. This silence is their most powerful lesson. It reminds us that the human drive to create beauty, to seek meaning, and to build connection with the divine can take forms far beyond our modern assumptions. A society can achieve staggering complexity without leaving us written records. It can communicate the deepest truths of its universe not through text, but through scale, through spectacle, through art that was meant to be experienced in the shuddering heart of a ritual, not studied in a museum case. Sanxingdui stands as a permanent monument to the diversity of ancient human experience. It expands our understanding of what civilization can be. So now the question returns to you after this journey through the bronze and the silence. What do you think happened in that fertile Sichuan basin 3,000 years ago? Was it a flood that broke their covenant with the gods, an earthquake that shattered their faith? A spiritual revolution that demanded a new world, or a story we have not yet imagined? Share your theories in the comments below. And if you want to keep exploring history's greatest puzzles, subscribe for more deep dives into the forgotten corners of our past.